You are 18 years old. In most countries that means graduation, university applications, first jobs, the beginning of something chosen. In North Korea, it means the military. Not as a choice, as an assignment, handed down by a state that has decided, on your behalf, that the next 10 years of your life belong to the Korean People's Army. The Korean People's Army is not just the world's fourth largest military by personnel count. With approximately 1.28 million active duty soldiers, it is the organizing institution of North Korean society, the entity through which the state maintains control, distributes resources, and shapes the identity of every man and many women who pass through it. And the life you live inside it depends almost entirely on one thing: where you were born in the hierarchy that determined your rank before you ever put on a uniform. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly what life looks like at every level of North Korea's military structure. From the private who enters with nothing to the generals who live in a parallel world, separated from their soldiers by a distance that is measured not just in rank, but in reality itself. To understand rank in the Korean People's Army, you first have to understand Songbun. Songbun is the North Korean system of social classification, a hereditary political loyalty score that was established in the 1950s and has determined life outcomes for every North Korean citizen ever since. Your Songbun is inherited from your parents, and from their parents before them. It is based on what your family did during the Japanese colonial period, during the Korean War, and in the years after. Did your ancestors support the regime? Did they have connections to the South? Did they have Japanese collaborators in the family? Were any relatives captured as prisoners of war? Your Songbun reflects all of it. And it follows you. There are three broad categories. The core class, descendants of those considered loyal to Kim Il-sung and the founding of the state. The wavering class, the majority, politically neutral in the regime's assessment. And the hostile class, descendants of those who opposed the regime, had connections to the South or to Japan, or were labeled as class enemies. In the military, Songbun determines almost everything that rank alone does not. Which units you are assigned to. Whether you can be considered for officer training. Whether you will spend your service carrying a rifle, or carrying the bags of someone who has already been selected for a different future. The hierarchy of the Korean People's Army is not just a military structure. It is Songbun made visible. You enter as a private. The Korean term is jeonsa. You are at the bottom of everything. And what that means in practical terms is a daily reality that defector accounts have described with remarkable consistency. Food is the first shock. The official daily ration for a North Korean soldier is approximately 800 grams of grain. In practice, defectors have described receiving significantly less, particularly during the severe shortages of the 1990s and 2000s, when famine conditions affected even the military. The military does receive preferential food allocation compared to the general civilian population. But preferential, in North Korea, does not mean sufficient. Chronic hunger is not a crisis in the Korean People's Army. It is a condition. Training is physically brutal and ideologically continuous. Physical drills, weapons training, and political study occupy virtually every waking hour. The political education sessions of self-criticism, group criticism, study of Kim family ideology and the history as the state presents it, is not separate from military training. It is military training. The private learns to operate a weapon. They also learn that the weapon exists to defend the supreme leader, that the greatest honor is sacrifice in his service, and that the outside world is a place of suffering and aggression that only the Korean People's Army stands between. These lessons are not presented as ideology. They are presented as fact. And in an environment where access to outside information is essentially zero, and where everyone around you is being taught the same thing, they become over time felt as fact. The private has almost no privacy and almost no autonomy. Passes outside the base are extremely rare, particularly in early service. Communication with family is restricted. Personal possessions beyond what is issued are not permitted. The total institution is total in a way that few military environments outside of North Korea actually achieve. Everything that constitutes a self separate from the unit, the family, the history, the personal preferences, the individual wants, is systematically made inaccessible. What remains is the soldier. If you have survived the first several years and performed adequately, you may be promoted to corporal. Then sergeant. The non-commissioned officer grades. The daily material reality improves slightly with each promotion. Marginally better food allocation. Slightly more autonomy over subordinates, a degree of authority that makes the brutality of the private's existence something you can enforce rather than simply endure. But the most significant determinant of what your NCO career looks like is still Songbun. NCOs with high Songbun are positioned for officer consideration. They are assigned to units where advancement is possible and visible to those who make such decisions. NCOs with lower Songbun fill the ranks of the units that are never going to produce generals. The construction battalions, the agricultural units, the elements of the Korean People's Army that are, in practice, a form of controlled labor for the state's economic projects. Defector accounts describe NCOs in these units spending significant portions of their service, not training for combat but farming, building, and working on state infrastructure projects. The military labor serves the state's economic needs, while maintaining the military's role as the primary organizing institution of society. For the NCO in such a unit, the 10 years of mandatory service stretch into a different kind of existence. Not the idealized warrior serving the supreme leader. A laborer in uniform, with military discipline and military hierarchy, doing work that civilian labor in other countries would perform. The officer corps is a different country. Entry requires not just rank and performance, but a specific combination of Songbun, political reliability, and connection to the networks that determine officer selection. The lower officer grades, lieutenants and captains, represent a significant material improvement over enlisted life. Officers receive better food rations, access to certain goods that enlisted soldiers cannot obtain, housing that provides at least minimal privacy, and the possibility of sending small amounts of money or goods to their families. They also carry a burden that enlisted soldiers do not. Responsibility for political reliability. Officers are responsible not just for the military performance of their units, but for the political loyalty of every soldier in them. If a soldier under their command commits a political violation, attempts to defect, expresses skepticism about regime ideology, has contact with unauthorized outside information, the officer is held accountable. The power of the officer grades is real. So is the surveillance that accompanies it. Mid-ranking officers, majors and lieutenant colonels, exist in a world that is defined by the management of this dual accountability, military performance and political compliance. Their own career depends on both, and the management of political compliance in a unit of hungry, exhausted soldiers who have been separated from their families for years requires a specific set of skills that military training alone does not provide. It requires the ability to identify discontent before it becomes action, to manage the social dynamics of a unit that has more reasons to be discontented than the ideology provides ready answers for. The mid-ranking officer who has managed this well advances. The one who has a defection or a political violation in his unit faces consequences that extend beyond demotion. Senior colonels and general officers occupy a world that would be unrecognizable to the private counting his grain ration. The senior military is part of the broader elite structure that the Kim regime has created and maintains through careful management of resources, privilege, and access. General officers and their families live in dedicated housing. They have access to imported goods through the state distribution system that serves the elite. Their children attend better schools, have access to opportunities for foreign study or training, and inherit the connections their parents have spent careers building. The material difference between the general's life and the private's life is not a difference in degree. It is a difference in kind. But the price is not low. The senior military elite exists in a state of managed dependency. The privileges they enjoy are provided by the state and can be withdrawn by the state. Access to the Kim family, which remains the ultimate source of all privilege in North Korea, requires demonstrated and continuous loyalty. A general who is perceived as insufficiently loyal, or who is caught in one of the regime's periodic purges, does not lose their career. They lose everything. The fate of Jang Song-thaek, the uncle of Kim Jong-un, once considered the second most powerful man in North Korea, executed in 2013 on charges that included treason and corruption, is a lesson that every senior military figure has studied carefully. No rank is permanent in North Korea. Every privilege is contingent on the continued favor of a leadership that has demonstrated it will not hesitate to remove anyone, at any level, who presents a challenge or fails to serve its needs. This dynamic, the combination of substantial privilege and absolute contingency, produces a specific psychological condition in the senior military. Visible loyalty that is not always felt loyalty. The performance of devotion to the supreme leader that is essential for survival, regardless of what the individual actually believes. Defectors from senior levels of the North Korean system. And there have been some, including high-profile cases like that of Tae Yong-ho, a former North Korean diplomat who defected to South Korea in 2016, have described a leadership class that participates enthusiastically in the performance of loyalty while maintaining a private understanding of reality that differs substantially from the official version. The gap between performance and belief, which exists at every level of the Korean People's Army, is widest at the top, where the stakes of the performance are highest, and where the consequences of the gap becoming visible are most severe. You are 18 years old. That's where we started. And now you know what the next decade looks like, not in the abstract, in the specific material reality of each level of a hierarchy that determines almost every dimension of your existence before you have the information to evaluate the terms. The private counting his grain ration, the NCO managing political reliability in a unit of hungry soldiers, the officer navigating the dual accountabilities of military performance and political compliance, the general performing loyalty in the palace of a supreme leader who has demonstrated that no one is exempt from removal. All of them inside the same institution, all of them shaped by it, all of them separated from each other by distances that cannot be measured in rank alone. The Korean People's Army is not simply a military. It is a society, a complete social world with its own hierarchies, its own resource distribution, its own system of meaning, and the life you live inside it, the food you eat, the future available to your children, whether you spend your service carrying a rifle or carrying someone's bags, was determined before you arrived, by the Songbun your grandparents carried, by the side of a war that ended before your parents were born, by a system that has been deciding, on behalf of every North Korean born into it, what their life will look like, before they were old enough to ask whether that was fair. If understanding how power actually works, in the systems least visible to the outside world, matters to you, subscribe. No sensationalism, no easy conclusions, just the documented reality explained as clearly as the available evidence allows. Hit subscribe. There is one more dimension to the Korean People's Army that most outside accounts miss. The specific role women play in it. North Korea implemented mandatory military service for women in 2015. Though women had been joining voluntarily, and through various forms of pressure, for decades before that. Female soldiers serve in a separate but parallel hierarchy. They are assigned primarily to support roles: communications, medical, logistics, cultural performance. Though combat-capable units exist and women have served in them, the material conditions for female soldiers are not better than for their male counterparts. In some documented accounts from defectors, they are worse. Han Young, a North Korean defector who served in the military before leaving the country, described in interviews the specific vulnerabilities of female soldiers in the Korean People's Army. The power differential between male officers and female enlisted soldiers creates conditions for abuse that the military's internal accountability structures have not effectively addressed. The political cost of reporting, which would require an enlisted woman to make a formal accusation against a superior in a system where superiors hold near absolute power over subordinates' lives and careers, is so high that most incidents are not reported. This is not a feature unique to North Korea's military, but the combination of extreme hierarchy, total information control, and the specific accountability structures of the Korean People's Army creates conditions in which it is particularly difficult to address. The Songbun system operates differently for women in one specific respect. Marriage provides a potential path for women to improve their effective songbun, or to lose what they have. Marriage to a man of higher songbun can open doors that were otherwise closed. Marriage to a man whose songbun is lower, or who subsequently falls out of political favor, can restrict them. This creates a specific set of incentives that shape marriage patterns within the military and the broader elite, and that tie the material fate of women to the political fortunes of the men they marry in a particularly direct way. The female soldier who completes her service and returns to civilian life carries with her a military record that is part of her permanent file. Service in the Korean People's Army is considered honorable. It demonstrates loyalty to the state. It can, in certain contexts, provide access to opportunities that civilian women without military service cannot access. It also costs years of her life in conditions that are, by any external standard, extremely harsh. The calculation is not one she made. It was made for her by a system that has been making calculations on behalf of its citizens for more than 7 decades. And that shows no sign of asking them whether they would like to be consulted.